Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health with Sara Banta. I'm a busy wife, mom of 3, and an NANP certified supplement professional, but that's not all. I'm also the founder of the multi-award-winning Accelerated Health Products, a brand offering innovative natural supplements to optimize your health. And we just released Accelerated Liver Care. It is the best liver supplement out there. Make sure you check it out. This podcast is not just a source of information. It's a community. We're all here to learn and grow on our health journeys. And this podcast is the springboard to learning. And the free group coaching on Telegram is where we continue learning together. So you can ask questions. I post tips and tools to deepen your health and keep you motivated. So here's what you can expect. New episodes every Monday and Wednesday with in-depth health discussions and expert guests. Hot topic issues that are in the news on Fridays to keep things interesting. And then, of course, followed up with the free health group coaching on Telegram. So all the information's on my website, SaraBantaHealth.com. And if you've thought about detox, but you're a little nervous because you hear about those detox flu symptoms, well, I've created over 10 unique, easy detox cleanses. You literally feel great day one. You're resetting your energy, your motivation, all of that while your body's going through a marathon and detoxing. So take the detox quiz on my website and you can find out which one is right for you. And if you don't know what supplements you need, complete my health goals form. It's complimentary. I will put together a free protocol just for you. So just by taking a few steps forward with your health, you can change your life. And I'm here to help you along the way. And I'm so excited about today because one of my favorite topics is gut health. That's what started my journey. I was on the verge of Crohn's disease, IBS, you name it. I had it, colitis. It was all down in there. And if you're not healthy down there, you're not healthy. And we've got Stephen Wright back. He is one of my favorite gut gurus. Welcome, Stephen. How are you today?
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me. I'm doing good.
So we've talked about histamines and we've talked about the HistaHarmony. I take it every day. And right before we came on, I told you don't ever get rid of the HCL Guard and the Holozymes because I can't live without them. They have been game changers. And for all of you out there, if you know my story, my rock bottom, I was bloated all the time. Food was rotting in my stomach. I didn't understand why my skin was breaking out. My hair was falling out. I was eating all the right foods, all the protein, constipated diarrhea going back and forth. And I can tell you, I don't remember the last time I was bloated because of Stephen's Holozyme and HCL Guard. And now we're going to be talking about Tributyrin and the benefits of Butyrate. So I'm super excited to get into this. It's a little more confusing. It's not as straightforward as probiotics have been. And, that's the buzzword, right? So, Stephen, maybe you can talk about prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, which is Butyrate.
Yeah. So it can be confusing, and hopefully this is not your first time hearing about it, but it could be. And you may need to listen to something I say a few times or look at some pictures online. I know pictures help me, but what's really important to think about is prebiotics are specific types of fermentable food that feed good bacteria. Probiotics are good strains of bacteria that have been shown in studies to help us with our health in some way. And then postbiotics are the poop or the metabolism or the metabolites of those probiotics. And so that includes a range of substances, frankly, that some of which we don't even know yet. We can't even measure, but we can measure some of it. And we have been for the last 30 plus years. Short chain fatty acids are the most common metabolite of a probiotic and of the microbiome. And butyrate is the most important, the most well studied, and to date, the star of the show when it comes to postbiotics and metabolites. And so if If you're confused again, think of fiber as generalized food for all bugs. Think of prebiotics as specific food for specific healthy bugs. Probiotics are specific bugs with health claims or health benefits that have been studied. And then postbiotics are the output of those bugs when they consume that food.
Okay, great exclamation or explanation. And probiotics, I just want to touch on this. You want to be careful with what you're taking in because you might get too much of a good thing. And that's why I like the spore biotics because it grows what your gut needs. But are you saying that without probiotics, the body cannot produce its own postbiotics or butyrate?
Yeah, I'm saying that I think in some point in the future, our microbiome will be classified as another organ. And, that'll be controversial because there's all these like weird ways in which an organ has to be defined. But like um, our microbiome, which is the makeup of all the bugs inside of us, including, the unhealthy ones, but hopefully it's mostly healthy. That uh, mass, that biodome, if you will, like that seventh grade science experiment inside of you, it makes an essential nutrient for the rest of our body. There's no other place that we make butyrate. We don't make it in the cells somewhere. We don't do some sort of specific thing. It comes from the bugs eating the leftover parts of our food. And then that nutrient is literally linked to every single chronic disease being ill health. So there's links to bone health, eye health, brain health, obviously the gut, skin. I even saw this cool one on muscle now. Like there's a muscle butyrate axis. If you don't have enough butyrate, you might not be able to build enough muscle. And so butyrate is used and very, very important for the gut. And I think we're going to dive a little deeper into the nitty gritty there. But I think it's also very important for you to understand that this, I call it the hippie community. This hippie community of microbes is making something that goes systemically throughout our whole body and it interacts with all of our cells. And it's extremely important for the health of our entire body.
So short chain fatty acids are derived from butyrate. That short chain fatty acids, people in the keto community understand what that means. There's also this whole GLP-1 trend going on. Can you connect the dots? Are we talking about the same thing here?
Kind of. So there's long chain fatty acids, there's medium chain fatty acids or triglycerides. That's your MCT oils that a lot of people are familiar with, and then there's short chain. And like sometimes scientists are like super clever and solidly annoying, and then sometimes they're just like very direct. And when it comes to like the description of the nutrients that we eat, they're pretty direct. And so literally what it means is a very small number of fatty acids connected together. And then what's important to note is that um, the differing lengths, while you and I might be like, why does that? I mean, a couple extra atoms here or there, a couple extra molecules connected here or there doesn't sound like that big of a deal. It's actually like a super big deal for our body and how we interact with these different types of food groups. And so, yes, short chain fatty acids, very different than medium chain fatty acids or triglycerides, very different than your olive oil or your lard or your long chain fatty acids, and people are supplementing with various types of interesting compounds, like various types of ketone compounds, and they're playing around with at the edge of science and performance biohacking. But there's not a butyrate compound. There's no eating it from butter. That's not true. Yes, it does naturally occur in butter, but your stomach acid destroys it all. Not to
Mhm.
mention the amount you would need to eat from the butter would be like, I don't even know. It's unknowable because it won't get through your stomach properly.
Mm.
Uh, and so we really do ferment it with our food from our bugs, unless we don't have the right bugs or unless those bugs don't have food.
So people are probably wondering, well, why would I have to supplement it? Can't I just get it from my diet? And this is something I actually talked about on another podcast was the fact that detoxification used to be a fad. Supplementing used to be a fad. Both of those are now essential because of our environment, our food supply, processed foods, all of these things. So, why are we needing to supplement with butyrate?
Mostly because of the ways in which we are living our lives. Our environment has changed significantly. And, I don't think I'm saying anything no one on this podcast has ever thought about, but like there's a lot of toxins now. Our food supply has changed. Before the food supply even changed, though, in general, the Western populations eat less starches, we eat less vegetables, and we eat less fruits. And the food that feeds the butyrate producers are made up predominantly of your fruits, your vegetables, and your starches. That's what you need to be eating to feed the cross feeders who then feed the butyrate producers. And so, in general, as we've gone from the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s through the production and westernization of our environments and our lives, we now just eat things that are typically processed. But even if we're on a non-processed diet, let's say we're on a paleo diet, even then it's hard to find people that, and I'm just as guilty as any, who are constantly eating, potatoes and sweet potatoes or starch every day, and constantly eating a bunch of different types of vegetables, not just one type, not just your favorite like broccoli or something, but like a lot, and then constantly eating more than just blueberries. That's like what I do. I'm like, just keep getting the blueberries instead of, actually eating a diverse range. And so, in order to have proper butyrate production, you need to consume the types of food that can turn into butyrate. You have to break that food down properly, which again, it's a struggle in our stressed out, you know, hyper vigilant bodies we have these days. And then lastly, you have to have the microbiome species there to do the job. And again, it's not like you eat grapes or blueberries or something and they just immediately turn into butyrate. There's a hippie community down there, like just like in a hippie community, like a well-formed, like idyllic one. Somebody's doing music, someone's watching the kids, someone's cooking the food, someone's doing the taxes and the finances. The same thing's happening inside your microbiome. The initial bugs are going to turn those polyphenols and those starch things into other molecules, and then they're going to pass it off to the next group of bugs. And then those bugs are going to do some work on it, and they're going to pass it off to the next group. And then like 2 or 3 passes is when the butyrate producers can actually do their job, which is make the butyrate. And so if you lose a certain grouping of bug along the way, you could still kind of fracture that delicate ecosystem in a way where you don't get the butyrate you need every day.
Right. I always explain the fact that people think that just because they eat food, it turns into energy. But there's this chasm of like what's going on in between. You've got leaky gut, you've got assimilation issues. And like I started out with, my gut, when I was at rock bottom, I was eating food and it wasn't assimilating into my body. It wasn't building muscle, it wasn't building my hair, it wasn't doing its job or giving me energy. There's that chasm. And then there's all these steps that have to all go right for your body to be able to do it itself. And we've got chronic stress, which kills the gut, right? And it does so many
Yep.
other things. It kills your thyroid and all of these other things. But then you've got the microplastics, the fluoride, the bromide, the chlorine, the GMOs, the glyphosate, then the artificial sweeteners and lack of fiber in the processed foods. 70% of the American diet is processed food. It's not real food. So we're all running around with leaky gut. Even if you don't have gut issues, you probably have leaky gut unless you're doing something about it. So can you explain how butyrate helps with the gut lining and with leaky gut?
Yeah. So, um, many years ago, when I first started talking about leaky gut back in like 2012, 2011, it was thought that there was these rubber bands that keep your cells together, called tight junctions, and these tight junctions would get broken or loose and lax, and then food or toxins or particles that were supposed to be inside your gut but not inside your body would flow freely into the body. And our immune system doesn't fly with the immune system. It gets very pissed And that's when a lot of cross reactivity and autoimmunity happens. It's also it's also where chronic, like, daily inflammation can come from. And so there was this idea 10, 15 years ago that you could just focus on the tight junctions. You could somehow seal them up and make them strong again, and then you would not have leaky gut again. And I think at the time it was cutting edge and it was the right information. But since then, we've had another decade of research, and the research has really exploded. And there's articles on you can go to the Wayback Machine where you can see articles on Harvard and Stanford. And I have screenshots of these because they were calling me a quack back then, saying that leaky gut isn't real. And now we have a ton of research showing that leaky gut precedes basically every chronic disease. Like, there's an association. It's either a comorbidity or it's part of the process of developing every single chronic disease. So now the research on leaky gut and the gut has exploded, especially the last 4 years. And what we know now is that there's not just, like, our bodies, like, think about it, like, our bodies are very complex. They're very well built. There's not going to be just one little thing that could go wrong and then boom, chronic disease just takes over your body. There's a lot of different layers that would protect the body from the story that I told about toxins or even like healthy bugs going into the body unchecked. And so what we know now is that there's at least 5 layers, and inside of each of those layers are like sort of sub layers that sort of create this full gut defense system and keep it from becoming a leaky gut scenario, where we begin to, like I said, create autoimmunity, where we begin to have, food sensitivities to everything, not just foods that have immunogenic potential, but also just like beef and kale and strawberries, like normal stuff. And so what we're finding, at least what I found, is that butyrate is connected to all those layers of the gut. And if you have enough butyrate production, if everything we talked about was happening perfectly, like you said, like if every step, like along the way of your digestion was happening well, which is unlikely, you would have a plentiful amount of butyrate. Butyrate would be supporting the health of your gut, and leaky gut wouldn't really be a thing probably, unless there was a big injury in some regard or a very big toxin exposure or something big happened.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're seeing is that potentially, because butyrate is connected to all 5 layers, and because it's typically really depressed in the Western society, just due to everything we've talked about so far, that this creates this cocktail to have leaky gut, where our gut defenses are way down, all the layers are way down. Then the tight junctions do get messed up and broken, and our immune system does get very pissed, and it does send out systemic inflammation signals all day long, every day. And that cocktail of issues going wrong will manifest wherever your genes are the weakest. So if you have a family history of IBS, congratulations, you have IBS. If your family also has a history of cancer, you'll probably have cancer. If you have a family history of Alzheimer's, or you pick wherever, everybody has weakness in their genes. No one gets out of this alone. But that's how it kind of unfolds. And then later on, sometimes it's months, most times it's years later, you start to develop these other chronic diseases, and you're like, man, how did I get here? And it happened, years prior in your gut.
Yeah, and I think in the last 5 years, and we have to be careful with what we're saying here, there's been a huge acceleration of histamine reactions and inflammation and accelerated chronic disease. And even if you have no gut symptoms, it could be from your gut. Your gut is everything. I'm just doing some, an article on ADHD and brain function. That's linked to the gut. Yes, you can have genetic predispositions, but you are so much more in control of your of preventing what your genes are telling you you're going to have. I have both Alzheimer's genes, and I'm doing everything in my power to make sure I don't get it. And I feel like my brain is so much sharper than it was in college. And so there's a way to overcome these things. So with that, I want to talk about how it modulates histamines, because we are seeing from the spike protein a huge ramp up in histamine response. People who've never had allergies, who've never had food issues, or I can't eat that, or I can't eat this, are now going, what is going on? I'm swollen. I've got nasal issues. I've got a huge histamine response. So where does butyrate play with histamine?
Well, there is a number of studies you can go search, like butyrate in asthma, butyrate in allergies, and then you just put NCBI after that, and it'll show studies on butyrate and asthma, butyrate and allergies, butyrate and like other inflammatory, allergic, histamine related disorders. And you'll find the papers. You can start to read them if you want. In general, there is a local impact that butyrate has in the gut, and then there's a systemic impact it has farther away. And so the local impact is that butyrate helps increase the mucus layer thickness, and there's a mucus layer everywhere. We have these mucus layers all over the place, but there's specifically one inside the small and the large intestine, and they're slightly different in both. But these mucus layers help separate the cells, like our actual gut cells, from the contents of our gut. And that, again, that contents could be beef and broccoli and chips and salsa and whatever you're eating, but it's also the microbiome and all the metabolites and everything, kind of in digestion, in process there. And so it's kind of, there's a lot of stuff going on. And so we don't necessarily want the cells to touch that mixture on a regular basis. We want there to be a separation, and the mucus layer is that separation. And so butyrate is essential for mucus production and very essential for the mucus thickness. It's also a mast cell stabilizer. So the way I like to talk about it is it's kind of like a weighted blanket for your mast cells. It's like a big hug. Like if someone's kind of freaking out, they're a little hypervigilant, they're not having a good day. Sometimes you can give a little pressure or a hug or something, and it can really help someone calm down. Very similar to butyrate and the mast cells. It just helps them stabilize. It helps them not be hypervigilant in how they react to the world. And then beyond that, butyrate, it helps with something called T regulatory cells. T regulatory cells are these specialized cells that help keep your adaptive part of your immune system in balance, or at least one part of it. The immune system is very complex, but T reg cells are important for not getting too out of balance one way or the other. And so you want enough of these balancing cells in your immune system, because if you start to get shifted in any direction in your immune system, you will start to experience symptoms. And so like a lot of hay fever or food sensitivity sometimes is excessive IgE formation. And IgEs are these antibodies that basically kind of trigger a lot of histamine and mast cell related issues. Butyrate helps dampen that response. In other words, it helps minimize that and make it more normal. And so whenever we lose butyrate, whenever we lose the microbiome, we start to lose what I call tolerance to the world. And tolerance meaning that, like, I don't believe, even with all our use of pesticides and GMOs and everything else, I don't believe that we have to live in a world where we're afraid of like grasses and pollen and cats and dogs and like really, really normal stuff for a human to touch and feel and interact with in this world. If you're having hives or rashes or your sinuses swell shut or your eyes get all red, you can't think, to very normal occurrences out in the world, I don't think we can blame that on the world. I think we have to look internally and say, how come our immune system can't be with that pretty normal thing? Because if I look around me, the majority of people are okay with it, but like for some reason, I'm not okay with it. And so a lot of times that is, there's a connection there to butyrate and the loss of butyrate, which just helps us with tolerance and it helps us with regulation to the world around us.
So a couple things that you just said I want to touch on is the whole idea is to make our systems more resilient. The environment's only going to get worse. And I was someone who was afraid to go out to dinner, afraid to travel. I would always get bloated. I was not resilient. And because of these supplements and fixing my internal environment, I am more resilient to what's out there. And then the other thing I just want to touch on, you said, well, why isn't everyone to my left and right having these issues and I am? My feeling on that, Stephen, is that everyone is so numbed out because they're so full of junk. They don't even know what symptoms they're feeling. And so if you are feeling the symptoms, kudos to you, because you probably are at least a little in touch with your system inside. But saying that, we've talked about histamines on a past podcast and the product Histaharmony, which I take with every meal. And for you guys that think you're eating healthy and you don't need this, what are the high histamine foods that you're probably eating? Bone broth, avocado, banana, fish. I just had fish for lunch. I sure took my Histaharmony. But you said the Tributyrin X, or the butyrate supplement, is that weighted blanket. So am I correct in saying that's your foundation to managing histamines, and then the Histaharmony is that extra layer, or would it be the other way around?
Yeah, I think the way you put it is, I could get on board with that. To me, they're on different sides of the equation. You know, my background is engineering, so I think in math terms a lot. Um, Tributyrin X is working on the side of the equation, which is how much histamine do we produce every day, and Histaharmony is working on the side of the equation of how do we break down whatever histamine we make.
Hmm.
So in the case of someone who's having a high histamine experience, a mast cell activation, we would love to lower the amount of histamine that's produced every day, and we'd like to raise the amount of histamine degrading enzymes that we have available because we're making too much enzyme or too much histamine to begin with. And so they work kind of on different sides of the equation. They're not a replacement for each other, and that's why people end up usually loving both of them for these types of issues, because you're reducing the supply of histamine and then you're increasing the ability to break down the histamine that is presenting.
Okay, so now I want to get into Tributyrin X versus sodium butyrate, calcium, magnesium butyrate, all of the other butyrates out there, the commonalities, and then the differences.
Yeah, and I didn't even talk about the oxygen layer yet, but if we have
Let's
time, we'll circle back to that.
Okay.
Uh, so just like cell phones go through a development process, right? Like the first we had flip phones. If you're old enough, you can remember. You know, I had a Razor. A lot of people had flip phones. There was car phones before that, these big bricks, and then there was the first iPhones, and those iPhones were like nothing compared to the iPhone 15. Um, that development process is very similar when it comes to supplements as well. In this case, people knew that butyrate was probably important, and usually the fastest way to stabilize a molecule that's very reactive to oxygen and is hard to work with is you bind it with salt or sodium. And so sodium butyrate was the first version of uh, butyrate supplements to be commercially available everywhere because it was the cheapest and the easiest to work with. And then there was a lot of studies actually on sodium butyrate, at least, probably at least 10 in humans of oral supplementation. And the results of those studies are generally very positive. I would say, at a minimum, there's either no results or very, very good results, whatever they were studying. Then CalMag butyrates came out next, and they were like a minor upgrade, but like it didn't get a lot of traction because they still smell pretty bad. They're the way in which minerals, sodium's a mineral, calcium's a mineral, magnesium's a mineral, the way that these minerals are absorbed in the body, it's kind of going to happen in the first part of the digestive process. Then people knew about tributyrin for a long time. It's just that it's a very difficult and delicate molecule to work with. And so in order to get it into a human, we have to tolerate the taste and the smell. And so if you've ever smelt a sodium butyrate bottle or even a CalMag bottle, it can be pretty dark. I liken it to like bile vomit smell. Like if you ever vomited some bile, like it's pretty gnarly. Some people don't care. They don't care. They don't have a smell aversion. I do. But anyways, tributyrin they figured out a way to start to work with it more and then encapsulate it. A scientist in Spain that we worked with, he figured out a way to encapsulate it such that you don't have that smell. You just have like a manufactured smell. You don't have the deep bile smell. And why this is so important is because prior to this, Tributyrin had been studied in humans, and the results of those studies were significantly higher safety tolerances, like 10x the dosages were used from sodium butyrate in humans to Tributyrin in humans. The studies in rats and mice, they did studies where they gave IV sodium butyrate. IV should always win any challenge. And then they gave oral Tributyrin, and the oral Tributyrin beat the results of the IV sodium butyrate. It was really wild stuff. And so what we can deduce from the research is that Tributyrin is safer, it's stronger, and it penetrates deeper into the gut, which is where we want to go. We want to go as deep into the gut as we can go, because it needs a little lipase to break apart. So it's kind of like a time-released molecule in and of itself. So it is the clear winner, even though the science hasn't quite caught up yet because it hasn't been around as long, commercially available for the scientists to use it. We will see in the next 10 years, Tributyrin is a far superior molecule to sodium butyrate. And I think pretty much anybody who's done a test trial between the two and their own bodies, they report the same things. And then if you put it inside of an enteric coated capsule, which is what we have at Healthy Gut, and I still believe, I think we're still the only one in the world doing it. This patent pending capsule is going to protect it until the pH reaches 7. And you might think like, big word, why does it matter? I don't care about this stuff. You sound like a nerd. I am. And it does matter because we want to get the molecule through the stomach as much as possible, because the stomach, it's supposed to destroy things. It's supposed to break things down. And all the rest of the products in the market use either a capsule that's not resistant, or they use a acid resistant capsule. Acid resistant capsules typically disintegrate in less than 45 minutes. The manufacturer won't warranty or claim them beyond that. Our food should be in our stomach like usually 90 minutes, somewhere between 60 minutes to 2 hours, somewhere around 90 minutes. So you're not going to get that capsule and that liquid through there. It's going to get broken down, and then the stomach's going to start churning that stuff up. Versus our capsule, we run simulated tests on every single production run. We run them through simulated tests. We always beat the 2 hour and 15-minute mark. Normally with 0 broken capsules, meaning like there's not even like a few capsules that are deformed. They work every single time. And what that does is it just makes sure that when it opens, it's already down in your small intestine. And that is the key, is the delivery point, and then how long it takes to actually come apart and everything. Most people, again, can do like a challenge between our product and other people's Tributyrin, and they do notice a difference.
I love that you talk about the specificity of the action and when it's supposed to be broken down, the time, how to take it, when to take it, because the problem in the supplement world, first of all, 95% of supplements are junk. Next, you've got these companies that are not being stringent about mold and bacteria in the supplements. So you're taking a supplement and it's probably causing a histamine reaction because it's full of mold and it's backfiring, or it's sprinkling in a little bit of an ingredient so it can put it on the label. And this is where that's why I love your company, Stephen. And it's so alike Accelerated Health Products, because we're so vigilant about delivery and action and efficacy, because if it's not going to work for you, then you're not going to come back and use it, and it's not going to help you, right? So the Tributyrin X, okay, so I am taking my Holozyme, well, I'm first taking my Histaharmony 20 minutes before I eat. So I'm cooking my dinner, I take my Histaharmony, I finish cooking it, put it on the table, I'm taking my HCL Garden Holozyme with my first bite of food, typically around there.
Okay, awesome.
And then the Tributyrin X is kind of post-meal or mid-meal. Would that be correct?
Yeah. You can literally take it on an empty stomach. You could take it with your HCL. Again, it will not open until the pH of 7 or higher. So it won't come apart just because you take it with some enzymes. It won't come apart just because you take it with some HCL. certain products are dosed better on an empty stomach or with food. But because of the capsule technology and because of the fact that butyrate is literally being produced inside of you 24/7, there's not really something that suggests you have to take it with meals or you have to take it at the end of your meal. I try to tell people like you and I, Sarah, we're definitely on the weird spectrum and we love supplements and we don't forget. But there's a lot of people out there that struggle with like forgetting to take them or like not having them near the table when they sit down to eat. It's just not on the it's not like ingrained in a really deep habit for their health yet. And so I try to make sure that people know, if you're one of those people who just is trying to remember to take them, just whenever you remember, take it.
Right. Okay. So we also know that in this crazy world of accelerated chronic disease, most of it is tied to metabolic disease, insulin resistance at the liver is diabetes, insulin resistance at the heart is heart disease, at the ovaries, it's PCOS, in the brain, it's Alzheimer's and dementia. So, how does butyrate help with insulin resistance?
Um, well, I mean, it's going to be upregulating all the pathways related to insulin sensitivity and leptin. Um, so it's not like it's not like an insulin supplement or insulin resistant supplement, if
Right.
you will. I wouldn't think of it that way. I would say it's the second and third order consequences of having butyrate or taking something like Tributyrin X is that you are generating the hormones needed in the right amounts to hopefully prevent or begin to reverse the insulin sensitivity, but more from a cellular level and the cellular signaling, not necessarily from like interacting with glucose or insulin or the receptors related to those.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that insulin resistance isn't just about eating too much sugar. There's all of these other factors. You've got, if your liver is suffering, then your insulin could go through the roof. And we've seen that in the last couple of years with the spike protein causing a disruption in liver function. And then A1C goes up and you haven't changed anything in your diet. So that is just one example. So, with the Tributyrin X, you were saying that you wanted to talk about oxygen, which oxygen, too much, it's like the Goldilocks, right? Too much of a good thing or too little of a good thing. You need the right amount. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, oxygen is fascinating because, like, in my head, I thought you want everything to get as much oxygen as possible, right? Like, you want your brain to get as much oxygen, you want your lungs, you want cells, and that's all true, except for the fact that the gut, which I didn't know this until about 2 years ago, the gut is actually supposed to be low oxygen and extremely low oxygen. Actually, the deeper you go into your gut, like the farther from your mouth to your anus, the less oxygen you should have. And it's so critical that the type of bugs in our microbiome that we call probiotics, the majority of them, like 99% of them, are a type of bug called an anaerobic bacteria. And anaerobe means without oxygen. And when you start to like go back to first principles and like, why do some things work and some things don't work? It's just mind blowing to me to like stop there and think like, wow, if my oxygen concentration in my gut is just slightly too high, these bugs are literally dead. This is not like it's not like a gray zone. It's not like you and I having some conversation where we can bend the rules. This is like you and I going to the moon without a spacesuit and being like, oh shoot, this isn't working very well, and then we're dead. The same thing's very true for these bugs. If the oxygen saturation starts to rise inside the gut, they're dead. No matter what we want to happen, that's just what happens. And guess what raises oxygen? The death of these bugs and the loss of butyrate. And we know this from all the antibiotic studies. The majority of the reasons why dysbiosis happens after antibiotics is because when the antibiotics come in, they do kill bad bugs, but they also kill the good bugs, of which many of them make butyrate. And when the butyrate stops being produced, the cells inside of our gut prefer a type of metabolism called beta oxidation. And what this essentially is butyrate plus oxygen. And so they literally are like oxygen scrubbers. They're sucking it out of our gut on a minute by minute basis, and they're combining with butyrate and for their preferred metabolism. And when they do that, they keep the atmosphere low oxygen. The bugs are very happy because they can coexist in this atmosphere. But when you come in with antibiotics, or you come in with like some other traumas or nervous system related things, and you lose those bugs, you lose the butyrate, the cells have to go back to glucose. And when they go back to glucose, they don't need the oxygen for that metabolism. So the oxygen starts to build up inside the gut.
Mhm.
And then boom, we have an even worse situation where the oxygen goes up further, more good bugs die, more oxygen, more good bugs dead. And it creates this really complex cycle where literally the only way out, in my opinion, is to get butyrate back. But if you've already lost too many of the bugs, you can't do it through prebiotics, and you can't do it through food. You have to jumpstart it, like almost like lighter fluid for a fire that won't light. You have to get it going again. And usually I think that's one of the most underrated things. It's one of the things that I'm going to be teaching a lot about in the next couple of years, is this oxygen gradient. And the fact that you have to have low oxygen is literally, it's physics. Like, it has to be low. Otherwise, the bugs we all want to grow will not grow.
It's fascinating, because just like you said, you think oxygen's good. No. And then it's the vicious cycle of more oxygen kills more bugs, it creates more oxygen, and it's just this vicious cycle, making things worse and worse and worse. So with dosage, who and how should different people take Tributyrin X? And by the way, everybody, all of these supplements from Healthy Gut, we carry at Accelerated Health Products: the Tributyrin X, Histamine, the HCL Guard, the Holozyme. And I cannot tell you, they have been game changers. My life has changed because my gut is behaving, and it's so amazing. It's like, oh, I can actually eat that. So anyways, I just had to throw that in. But dosage, it's not as like Histamine, I feel like you could probably take as much as you want. It's not going to backfire. HCL Guard is going to tell you when you're at your dosage, because you're going to get a slight burn in your tummy if you have taken one too many. So I recommend just continuing to increase until you get to that point and then back off. And obviously, if you're having a more heavy meat-based meal, you might need a little more. Holozyme, you can't overdose. You just, you're going to take it and it's going to do great things, and you're not going to have any side effects if you take too many. So with the Tributyrin X, how do you dose?
Yeah, so it is a little bit more complex, mostly just for people who are constipated. And think about it on a scale, because constipation, actually all things occur on a scale. No one just have insulin resistance. No, you could have like really bad insulin resistance, or you could have mild insulin resistance. Well, you could be so constipated that you need an enema every day to go to the bathroom. You could be just mildly constipated where, for the first time on this show, you're realizing that you should go to the bathroom every single day. You should poop every day, and it shouldn't hurt, and it shouldn't be like rabbit pellets. It should be, you can look up the Bristol stool chart. It should be like around a 4. So 3.5 to 4.5 on the Bristol stool chart. If you're not doing that, some of you might need some magnesium. There's lots of different ways to healthily deal with constipation. But the more constipated you are, the slower you need to go with the introduction of Tributyrin X. And the reason why is something called a paradoxical reaction. It's our belief, this is still just a theory, that constipated people have the lowest amount of butyrate versus people with diarrhea or mixed IBS. What we see is that the more constipated you are, the slower you have to go. And usually that looks like one pill every 3 days or so. And if you are someone who's very constipated, you might need to up your magnesium glycinate or whatever you're using to work with that. But then after a few weeks, you should get to every other day. And then maybe every day by like week 6. And then hopefully by like week 8, you're at like 2 a day. Maybe week 10 or so, you're at 2 or 3 a day. When that happens, somewhere usually between week 10 and week 14, we see the spontaneous bowel movement change. And what that means, that's actually a very important term. What that means is you go from having these crutches to go to the bathroom to literally generating bowel movements as a healthy, normal person. And they're easy to pass. They're happening on a regular basis. And you start actually tapering off your stool softeners, your whatever you're using to deal with your constipation. And that's brilliant and amazing. It doesn't happen to everybody who's constipated, but it does happen to 30 to 40% of people who use the product and stick through that onboarding phase. If you're someone who has loose stools, you're like in a totally different, village or whatever. You're way on the other side. You can literally start with day 1, 2 day 2, 3 day 3. And it's actually the one thing that if you're already doing several things to try to deal with your loose stools and you're not actually getting results, it's the one thing that you can usually see results when nothing else has worked. And so we have some people that do 6 a day, some people do 12 a day. It just depends on your body, but you are trying to regulate towards your stools. You're trying to get good stools. And normally the effective dose for humans, in our opinion, is between 3 and 6 a day.
Okay, so your stools are kind of your sign as to where you are with the dosage and the health of your butyrate.
Correct.
All right. Well, Stephen, I can't believe we're out of time. I'm so grateful for you and the supplements. And like I said, everybody, they are all at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. I use them daily. And that's why I love having Stephen on, because I love talking about why these things work for me and work for all of you. I've had amazing testimonials from people as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. Our discussion does not have to stop here. If you're feeling lost, you don't know what gut supplements to take, no worries. I'm here to help. I know it can be confusing. You can get your free supplement protocol at SaraBantaHealth.com. Complete the form, and I will put together a personalized plan for you. Follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products and join the free group coaching on Telegram. There's no downside. I answer your questions. I post insights every day, and you keep moving forward on your health journey. Listen anywhere. Accelerated Health with Sara Banta is on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and over 100 platforms. And you can use coupon podcast10 to try out any of the supplements we've talked about. I'm live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so join me next time to unlock your health potential.